Hello, I'm Karl Wells. My guest today is largely responsible for writing his own success story. He grew up in a small community called Triton Island on the northeast coast of Newfoundland. His first business was a gas station, but he wasn't satisfied with that. He had much bigger things to do. Eventually, he became the CEO and owner of one of the fastest growing and best known fast food brands in Canada, Mary Brown's Chicken, with now almost 200 outlets across the nation. It's my pleasure to welcome Gregory F. Roberts to the program. Hi, Greg.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Greg, I want to talk to you first of all about where you grew up. I noticed from the map there are 3 Tritons on the map. There's Triton, Triton West, and Triton Island. You grew up in Triton Island. Mm-hmm. Tell me what Triton Island is like and what it was like growing up there.
Triton is a small island. It used to be actually 3 separate communities on the island called Cards Arbor, Jim's Cove, and Triton, Greater Triton. And back in the 70s and 80s, it was all amalgamated into one community called Triton. Triton is just a small island. It's actually connected by a causeway these days, but I believe to this day it's still more of a small island feel in the way people are. Really typical rural Newfoundland community. And typical, services and stuff in the community. And I still go back there to this day. All my good friends and some of my family are still home, so I never really lost contact with Triton.
Tell me about your family, your mom and dad and your siblings.
Mom and dad had a big family. There was 11 of us. I had 7 sisters and 3 brothers. And there's still 9 of us alive today. My dad passed away when I was a teenager, so my mom was in her late 40s at the time, and so she, the older ones certainly helped take care of the younger ones. And tradition, it's common in the large rural families in Newfoundland, and so some of my older sisters kind of, to some extent, acted like a mom to me. I probably still do to this day.
So you're pretty close to them, I would imagine.
Yeah, I am. I'm the second youngest. I have a younger sister. And I think for a large family, we're still relatively close. We still do a lot of stuff together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you were a kid, did you work summer jobs, that kind of thing?
Oh, well, coming from a big family, back then we all had to work early, and my dad had a small service station, garage, and gas station in the community, and we all worked in that from a young age, me and especially my brothers. And my first job, we started when we were 12. It was no choice. You had to work to pitch in such a large family, and that's what we did. And I certainly never hurt because of it, and I learned from it. And I believe to this day there's lessons from that became part of me in my business.
So when you were a little boy, did you think one of these days I'd like to be a big businessman? I'd like to be an entrepreneur. I mean, did you have that spirit in you when you were a young fellow?
Absolutely. I never thought it'd be a big business. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. A lot of members of my family, uncles and my dad and my grandparents and great-grandparents going way back had small rural businesses, and I guess that had a big impact on me, and inspired me to this day to be self-employed, to be an entrepreneur, and I really never seen myself working for someone else right from day one. So absolutely, I think that was an example that was around me from day one, for sure. Mm.
So tell me about your school years, your grade school years. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy school? Did you like learning? Did you like reading books?
I was okay with school. I felt that was a stepping stone, as something that you had to do to have an easier life. In my community, a lot of people like my parents and their peer group and their parents before them never had the opportunity to go very far in school. So, like a lot of rural communities back then, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for education. So I seen how people around me and my parents, missed out on a lot because they didn't have a lot of education. I believe Dad had his grade 7 and Mom had her grade 8. And to be candid, in business, I seen where that was probably stressful, and I always aspired to have a good education before I went into business.
Do you think you inherited some of your entrepreneurial spirit from your ancestors or from your immediate family?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if it's nature or nurture. My guess is more nurture. When you grow up and you see a lot of that around you, people, making their way themselves and being self-employed, certainly had an impact. And to this day, I think it affects me in how I do business and how I relate to small business people and franchisees and people just starting new in business, for sure. It also gave me a great insight in dealing with the public. Right from day one, you learn, I guess, how to humble yourself and kind of put the customer, the guest first. And I think I still, to this day, talk a lot about that, having to service and the retail business is about, to some extent, humility and having to listen and make the customer, the boss. Sounds like a cliche, put the customer first, but I think it's still important.
So you mentioned the fact that you wanted to further your education and do better than your parents had been able to. No surprise then that you went to Memorial University and you took a commerce degree. Why did you decide to go that route?
My dad used to go to an accountant and that he had a lot of respect for, and I think that had a big impact on me in early age. So when I was in grade 7, age 12, I can remember telling the teachers I was going to become an accountant, at that time a chartered accountant. And I remember getting some old beta tapes sent to me from Toronto, the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and watching them in grade 7 and finding out what it takes to become one. And part of that is doing a commerce degree, and then you do postgraduate studies and your article to become a chartered accountant, and that's what I did. So I had a long-range plan, I guess, back then.
So how did you like MUN?
I love MUN. I think it's a great university. To this day, I still spend a lot of time with MUN and the new president and stuff, and I think it was the foundation for everything I did later on in life and in my career, and to this day I used what I learned. I think coming from working in business when I was a young age, once I got into the business school, I was able to see how the academics and the practical business application worked, so I didn't find it quite maybe so academic and boring as some of my peer group in the program maybe, and I think that served me well when it comes to education.
Now when you finished MUN, you didn't go out and start your own business right away. You went to work for somebody. You were an employee for a few years. Talk about that period in your life.
I was a staff accountant for 3 years. By the way, when I was going to MUN, I started a little bookkeeping service.
Oh, I see.
And a little on the side. Once I started doing first couple courses in accounting, right away I wanted to use it to make a buck. And so I had a little business when I was in MUN. And then when I got out, I had to go to work with an accounting firm in order to become an accountant.
Right.
And so I spent 3 years with a local firm. The partners were Bill Morrissey and Bill Francis and Paul Tapper, and great people. I learned a lot from them. They had a lot of entrepreneurial clients that I respected, and it was a great learning experience. I don't know if I was a very good employee, you might want to ask them that, because I always want to be self-employed. So after I finished articling, I think to the day when I had my hours in, I think I put in my notice and I went into business for myself.
So the first business was the gas station?
Yes, it was a little typical rural gas station in rural Newfoundland and Pilley's Island, and I didn't have any money, and the owner that was selling it was generous enough to let me pay him out, and my brother gave me a $20,000 loan, and I had Canada student loans and lots of debt, so I had no money to do anything. So I was fortunate to have the owner, Jerry Bragg, and my brother Horo, who financed me to go into my first little business. So I left the firm, I gave my notice and went out to rural Newfoundland, and I started working at a gas station, and next door there was a little restaurant, and it was only open on weekends, and that was my first foray into the restaurant business.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you still own those businesses, or?
My brother owns that business today. One of my brothers, Darren, and he's got that business today.
Yeah.
He's the entrepreneur.
Okay, so now we'll talk about Mary Brown's Chicken, which is certainly probably the best known fast food brand in this province, well known across Canada, but we kind of look upon it as being our own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, prior to your acquiring the company, it had a history. It was started here, supposedly, and grew here. Can you, before we get into your time with Mary Brown, can you give us the backstory, the history of the company?
Sure, absolutely. Mary Brown's actually started it was called Golden Skillet. It actually started in Richmond, Virginia, and there's been a lot of stories over the years kind of made up. Even if you Google it to this day, the Wikipedia, unfortunately, is not correct, and a lot of the stories here, it's not true. It actually started as Golden Skillet in the 1950s in the U.S. It actually started as the actual product was in a department store in Richmond, Virginia, and it was just part of a number of offerings in that restaurant with the chicken. And then later on, say in the early 60s, mid 60s, the people that worked the restaurant in that department store started doing their own franchises and started building a company, Golden Skillet. Then later on in the late 60s, around 1968, 69, a couple of gentlemen from Newfoundland, their name was Cyril Fleming and Pat Tarrant. They were at a franchise show, I believe, in the States, and they got the Canadian rights for Golden Skillet. And again, this was before my time. I was born a couple of years later. And they brought Golden Skillet to Canada, to Newfoundland. And the first store, there's a lot of controversy around this, was actually in the Avalon Mall. When the Avalon Mall opened in, I believe, 1968, 69, that was our very first store. But right away, a number of other ones opened in places like Fortune, Mount Pearl. So within a very short amount of time, there was a lot of stores. So I think that's why there's probably 10 stores that claim to be the first one. But technically, Avalon Mall, we celebrated 50 years in 2019. That was the very first opening. Then the gentleman that had the master rights went on to Ontario and tried to franchise it across Canada, and they ended up selling out. It was taken over by some people from Ontario up until 2007 when I bought the brand.
And so at some point it went from being Golden Skillet to Mary Brown's.
Yeah, right away, I think that was within a year or two. There was a food company in Canada that already had the name Golden Skillet, so they had to change the name, and so they changed the name to Mary Brown's, and I believe it was a connection to the person that did the recipe originally. Her name was Mary Brown, so that's the connection. That's where the name came from. It's so it was a real person back in the day.
Right.
You know.
But was the name given by the Newfoundland owners?
Yes, they changed the name, like they had to change the trade name to
Right.
Mary Brown's in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, what made you set your sights on this company? Because at some point, you came on the scene.
Right. After the gas station, the restaurant business, the restaurant business really appealed to me. I liked the business, and I started getting into other retail type businesses, and eventually I became a franchisee of Mary Brown's. And I liked that Mary Brown's had number one, they had a great product. I'm biased today, but I still believe they do. And it was a good system and a well-known brand in Newfoundland. And so I became a franchisee actually at the beginning, and eventually I had 3 other stores. And then I started pursuing them because I knew eventually the shareholders were getting on in age, and I knew eventually they had to sell it. So I just kind of was relentless tormenting them to say, when you sell it, I would love to try to buy it and stuff like that. And finally, they gave me the time of day in 2006, and February 2007, they sold the brand to me. At that time, it was still really a Newfoundland company with a few stores in Ontario, and I believe maybe 3 or 4 stores in Alberta, but like literally 80% plus of sales were actually Newfoundland at that point in time.
So you are, I guess, the person who's responsible for spreading it across the country, certainly in most provinces, I guess, now.
Yeah, we had a vision. I can't take all the credit. I got together with some great people over the years to come to work for my company, and together we articulated a vision. We do 3-year mandates where we want to be. It's a living document where we want to be every 3 years, and we've been relentless in pursuing our mandate to grow the company, not just across Canada, but eventually around the world. And so we've, one step forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Slowly but surely, we started to make some inroads in other provinces, and we got really, we really, dug deep when it comes to operational consistency and other aspects of our operation. And we have some fine franchisees that have been with us for a long time, and a lot of great new franchisees that came on board with us, and a lot of new Canadians with us, and a lot of fine people across the country that together, I believe, I see it more as a partnership that we're building the brand together. So whenever we're really becoming a company looking for real estate, because our existing franchisees are now getting a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th store, so we don't look for franchisees anymore, we look for real estate. So every piece of A-list real estate, we call it, comes up, we go in right away and we make it a Mary Brown's, and we have franchisees, existing franchisees who want to go in and become the operators right away. So together, we're having a big impact in Canada.
I guess it helps too if there was already an existing restaurant in the property. Didn't you take over some of the KFC?
Yeah, we try to
outlets?
get whatever like existing restaurants that are not successful or moving on for different reasons. We try, like any place there's a good real estate, and sometimes we'll build a building, and so our goal is just to have good real estate, and whether that be an existing restaurant or not. And yeah, in Newfoundland a few years ago, there was some KFCs that became available. The landlords agreed to lease to us, and the franchisee was leaving the KFC, so we thought they had some great sites, so we managed to get some really good sites in Newfoundland, and move on from there. And so to this day, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we may be the fastest growing brand in Canada right now. Like, we opened 5 stores just last month, and we have a bunch more on the books for this year. So we're growing pretty fast. We should do 32 stores this year, and I believe we're on target to do 45 plus next year in Canada.
What's your biggest province outside of Newfoundland and Labrador?
Ontario. Ontario is actually bigger than, we have more locations now today. and even places like Edmonton has more locations than the Northeast Avalon. So it's Ontario and BC's growing really fast. Alberta, pretty much most all provinces are becoming big, but Ontario certainly with its population is a big one for us.
Yeah. Now, not all of your restaurants are the same, because a while back you started Mary Brown's Diner. Mm-hmm. Do you have many of those, and how did that take off?
I wanted to get into casual dining. I thought there was a great position for us. Like in the U.S., there's a lot of what we call fast casual, and we don't have a lot of that in Canada. And this was about 12 years ago. We started a concept called Mary Brown's Diner, but we only have one to this day, and we had a couple that didn't make it. And parallel to trying to start a new concept, the Mary Brown's core was really taking off, and to be candid, we were so busy with the core that we couldn't develop the diner anymore. I still believe it's a great concept. I love to do more, but it's just having priorities and focusing on the task at hand, which these days is the traditional Mary Brown's units.
Would you this makes me think about gambling, because it is a gamble when you change a brand or do another version or whatever. Would you consider yourself to be a bit of a gambler at heart?
When I was younger, I didn't think I was gambling. I didn't think it was a risk. We had plans, and I just believed in it, and I just thought we were just making something that's great. And as I got older, I guess I got a little bit more risk adverse. So when I look back on it now, I probably was a gambler. Maybe gamblers don't realize they're gamblers. I don't know. And I got a lot of friends, a lot of peer groups, and that are very conservative. I know, like, I attempted to do some investments with other people in my peer group, and they were not risk takers that apparently I was. And so I guess I'm only in later in my career, I'm starting to realize, maybe I have a higher tolerance for risk than most people, I guess. Even though I didn't believe it was a risk at the time. Maybe I was.
I think most people who achieve in business probably are.
Yeah, probably.
Now, during the pandemic, I'm assuming that because your business is largely takeaway, that you kind of fared pretty good, or?
Yeah, at the beginning, and again, I attribute to our franchisees and our wonderful leadership. Adi Shaheen is the president and chief operating officer, and he operates out of Markham, Ontario, and we had a great leadership team. And since COVID hit, they started with a plan. We all put together a plan. We kept our stores open, and we just went in crisis mode there last March and April. No one in my industry knew what was going to happen. We'd never seen this one coming. And I had to credit to Addy and his team and our franchisees, our wonderful franchisees, who they didn't close their stores, and they seen themselves as part of the food system. And like French restaurants, people were not going to all of a sudden start going to grocery stores and cooking for themselves. Some people just don't cook, or like something like 50% of meals is takeaway these days.
Absolutely.
So the restaurant business was an essential service, and fortunately, we are takeaway. Our product lends itself to takeaway. We were already takeaway. We're big on the apps, the delivery apps, and we fared really well. And we were very fortunate, because I got a lot of friends and people in our industry that just didn't make it, and we're very fortunate. We don't take it for granted, and we did well in COVID because of our takeaway element, and we feel very fortunate and that we were in that situation for sure. So we had a lot of people around us, and to this day in dire straits that went out of business, to be candid.
Mary Brown's has a reputation for being one of the best managed companies of its kind. why do you, you had to take some credit for that, obviously. But I was going to say, why do you think that is? Why do you think you have that reputation?
I'll take credit for hiring the right people. I think it's creating a learning environment. It's very easy to get caught up in some success and believe you know it all. And if you believe you know it all, you've created a ceiling for yourself. More importantly, you create a ceiling for your company. Your company can't go any further if you believe you know it all. And I believe in a learning environment, a performance-based environment, and that's where everybody is okay to take risks. We have a saying in our company, it's called fail fast and learn. We're actually okay with risk. If we're too successful, we believe we're being too conservative. And it's okay to fail, and it's okay to take some risks. Otherwise, as the company gets bigger, your leadership won't be able to take risks if they figure they're going to get in trouble or they're worried about it. So you got to create a open culture. It comes down to trust, really. It really is about trust. That sounds cliche or philosophical, but it's trust and getting people in contact with their self, understanding self-awareness, knowing, being comfortable in their own skin, and creating a culture around them where they're okay with taking risks and trying to do the right thing for the company, and looking out for people, creating mutual devotion and commanding high standards. And it sounds very philosophical, but it works. And people don't want to work for someone they don't trust. They don't want to work for people that are not treating them good. Then you got to create a culture, for that. So I'm going to take some credit for helping create that culture with other people, but I wouldn't have done it without the wonderful people around. We've been given the designation of one of Canada's best managed companies. It used to be called Canada's top 50 best managed private companies, and I think we just got it for our third year in a row. And I think a big part of that is just to find people we have and the culture of trust.
Greg, it's been a fabulous chat. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you for being on the program, and the best of luck to you and Mary Brown's Chicken.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And that's it for this edition of Karl Wells Point to Point. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.